Dominic, we'll check from Colonel Gopal and then we'll start because we are live on YouTube.
Sure. Good
Let-
afternoon, sir. Col.Gopal. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Right. Yes, we can see you now. All
One.
right. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. And
There's an audio issue, Dominic. Just one second. There's an audio issue.
can you hear me
I
clearly?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
इसको बंद कर.
Yes, we can. All right. Am I audible?
Yes.
It's repeating again and again. It's repeating. Your voice is coming again.
Is it echoing? Still?
Not for me, Anuba.
Okay.
It's if it's okay for you and Colonel Gopal, Dominic, it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's sounding perfect here. All right. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining in to our fifth day of the career week. We called it Synergence. I'm sure it's been a great week that we have had meeting so many people virtually, so many eminent speakers from so many different institutes, organizations, sharing their life experiences with us and their thoughts, their vision. And each guest, I'm pretty sure, has been unique in their own way, and they have created those lasting positive impressions on us. I personally had learned a lot during this week, and I'm sure each one of you did as well. Well, talking about first impressions, each time we come across some individual in our life, I feel it's practically like giving an interview where each one of us has the choice to win over that situation or that person and build a relationship. The choice is perfectly ours. Well, our career interviews are a little different, perhaps, but not so different at the same time. I have a funny example to quote. If imagine this, you were in an interview and someone asked you at a job interview, what are your strengths? I think this is a common question that everybody asks, in an interview to say that, what are you good at? The person says, I'm optimistic and a positive thinker. Very nice words. So the interviewer asks again, can you give me an example? He says, yes. When do I start? So for me, this is an epitome or extremism of confidence. I mean, I would give 10 on 10 for confidence for this person. I'm not sure if I'll hire the person, but definitely a 10 on 10 for being so positive about it. It shows positive energy. Well, so today, on that note, we're going to learn a little more about the art and science. We call it an art and science for interviews. What the interviewers are looking for when they interview you, and probably what you should be looking at, or you should be, careful around to say that where you can leverage all your positive energy, and because that is a moment of truth and dare. Correct. To help us with this immense and enriching experience, I have the privilege today to invite Shiv Nadar University's President, Colonel Gopal Karunakaran. Welcome, sir, and a warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Dominic and Anuba. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and pleasure to be with the students of the university. Thank you.
All right. So I will start with a quick, brief introduction for those who are meeting you for the first time. So you are the president of the Shiv Nadar University, and right, you have an MPhil and a master's from Madras University. You did your graduation from National Defense Academy from Jawaharlal Nehru University. It was a degree in 1980. You spent 30 years in the Indian Army. You were posted in Synergence region of Kashmir for 10 years, 6 months of which were spent in Siachen Glacier, the highest military post in the world. While in the Indian Army, you were chosen for the United Nations mission in Kuwait. You began your journey outside uniform in 2008 in the education sector. You are a member of the National Committee of Education of the CII, which is a Confederation of Indian Industries. And you have been the CEO of Shiv Nadar School since August 2014. And the most important part, so please, everybody, do not miss this off. The last and the most important point, which Colonel Gopal wants to instill in us today is he loves online sessions where participants put on their videos. So that's something which, after this slide, I would want probably everybody to put on their videos so that we are not talking to blank screens. We are talking to humans, though virtually, but there we are in front. All right. So without any further delay, Karunakaran, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. This introductory slide can go away.
Yes, I'm going to stop.
That works.
Okay.
Okay, so, thank you so much. I can see, not yet. I do not see too many faces here. I'm looking to see if I can see some students. Okay, listen, students, this is an impossible session. It's like going in for an interview with no students visible. And if no candidate is visible, I'm really not sure whether you can select anybody. So I'm wondering whether there are students here whose videos are on. Is there a way to see that?
No, they are waving at you.
Yeah, because on this is Teams.
Shubham has just waved. Dhruv has just waved. So switch on to the other mode. You'll see the.
Yeah, I need to go to another mode because I can only let me see more actions, large gallery. Oh, perfect. Okay, there's a house full of people here at least.
Yes, and
many of them are from the CDC team. So maybe the CDC team can actually put off their videos if they want to, except Dominic and Anuba ma'am and everybody else. So maybe I can see some more students. So, okay, this looks very interesting. And Anuba ma'am and I were talking, and this actually part of Synergence for me happened because we were talking about something, and I said, what about interview skills? And we thought it could be interesting. I have, I think, 4 slides. I will go through those 4 slides with you right now. But before that, let me reiterate what Dominic and I talked in the morning. This online world of ours of the last 1 year has made us hide behind a lot of dark corners, including these screens which are switched off. But let me also, since it is a session on interviews and what do interviewers look for, just imagine that if you were ever to select people based on audio inputs, do you think that's ever going to happen? And I have 3 interview experiences in my life only. I'll tell you about them. But just like Dominic said just now, virtually every day, virtually every week, you're always meeting people, and everybody all the time are assessing each other. And the most important interview I think I did was not those 3, which I will talk about, was probably when I met my future wife. Now, when you meet your future wife, whether it's as a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a arranged marriage where you're meeting someone, even that is a very important interview. Even that is sort of sizing each other up. An interview is nothing but sizing the other person up, right? So we're going to talk about what is it that interviewers, when you walk in through the door, how are people sized up? What are they looking for, right? And that's what I'm going to speak to you about. I have some notes. I have a particular plan about what I will cover. But I'm also conscious that everybody's sort of situation could be different depending on where you go. I'm going to give you generic inputs. Generic means it may be valuable in most settings, but it's not valuable in every setting. So, for example, the one thing I will put out right now, the competence for the job is a role fit based on a skill set and a competence set and a knowledge set, which is very specific. I'm not covering that. But in an interview, obviously, if you are to be, for example, a molecular engineer, right, or a chemical lab, something, obviously people will want to know whether you have the knowledge and the skill sets to do that job, right? So there is that component of it. Now I want you to raise your hands before I come to my slides, that how many of you were in Mr. Narayanan's session on the first day? And I'm going to distribute chocolates for anyone who can tell me the 10 C's like this. Anyone wants to try? We will unmute you and please say that I remember those 10 C's at the back of your hand. Like, who remembers the 10 C's? Who wrote them down? Okay, who wrote them down? Raise your hands. Adya, Vanshika, I can only see some of you here. But let me tell you, I wrote them down. Okay, now I seriously want to ask you on the 10 C's, what strikes you if you were looking at skill sets with somebody as eminent as Mr. Narayanan says, these are the 10 C's for me about people that I look for all the time. Just look through the list or think through the list and just think of what strikes you about the 10 C's in the context of the interview. You can put it on the chat. I'm waiting for the next 15 seconds for you to think and put on the chat. Obviously, one thing which strikes you is all of them start with C. But what strikes you about the 10 C's? Because then you would have picked it up. Yeah, there are 130 people. Nobody's writing anything on the chat. What interview look for? Continuous learning. VP. Okay. Competence. Clarity. SG. Doesn't tell me the names. It's not coming up on my chat. The competence, clarity, compassion, creativity. So as a whole team, you're getting it right. Okay, credibility. All right. So let's say that you've got all the 10 C's. But what strikes you about these 10 C's? You know what struck me? It struck me. Only one of those out of the 10 comes through a college degree. Only one of those comes through in your 12th class board marks. One of those C's comes through in the knowledge that you've acquired in your CGPA, which means 9 out of those 10 things are not something anyone's teaching you formally. Nobody's teaching you how to be credible. Nobody's teaching you actually how to be creative. Nobody's teaching you how to be courageous. Nobody's teaching you how to be compassionate. So what people look for in organizations are human qualities. By the way, for your generation, what you must know, that most of what my generation people considered as skill sets or even knowledge sets are taken by something already in your generation. You know what that's called? You could type it. That's something which has taken over that thing. They're called computers and algorithms. And computers and algorithms have taken over what were considered as knowledge and skill sets, even skill sets. It's things like creativity and compassion and courage, which computers are not going to take for some time, hopefully, not in the next 50, 100 years. So those are the sort of things that I picked up from Mr. Narayanan's talk, that I looked through this and I said, these are not things that you're taught in college. These are not things which comes in my board marks, but that's what people look for. Okay, so here goes. I'm going to share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this will probably take 5-7 minutes, and then we will go back to some conversations. Okay, so this is my life. This is something which Dominic mentioned, but most of my life and most of what I've learned in my younger years, which is generally from your age, because I went to the National Defense Academy when I was 17, and that's about 20 years ago, 2003. So 17 years ago or 18 years ago on the line of control in Kashmir. It's a wonderfully beautiful place. It's called the Gurez Valley, which is behind you. And you know what? I was thinking when Anuba said that, we decided I could do this. I looked back and I said, I've only done 3 interviews in my life. National Defense Academy in 1977. I was 17 years old. And when I look back on it's a 3-day interview process, 3 days. And there's also one round called interview. And there are a couple of other days where many other things happen. And when I look back on that interview, I said so many wrong things there. And how was I selected? I came, by the way, 19th in the All India merit list. But when I look back on the interview, I said disastrously what I thought was fairly stupid things when I thought of it. I was asked, for example, if we do not select you in the army, what are your options? I said, sir, but I haven't really decided to join the army. If you select me, I will decide whether I really want to join the army. Many years later, I met people who were in SSB, who were interviewing officers. I was a major or a colonel, and I asked them, didn't I say something so stupid? How did I get selected? Because they said, no, at 17, they just see whether you're authentic, whether what you're saying is honest. And they must have said that what you're saying is honest. And as a 17-year-old, that was perfectly fine because you must have said so many other good things. But that was one interview experience, but it was amazing 3 days of an interview process. Then I was selected for a United Nations mission, very prestigious, 1 whole year wearing a UN blue beret, representing your country, wearing the UN uniform. And the Vice Chief of the Army interviewed me. And I think I did, in my reflection, say maybe some silly things, but somehow I came through that interview. And the third and last interview I've ever done is Mr. Shiv Nadar in 2010. Again, an incredibly unique experience because Mr. Nadar is a unique, incredible human being. It was a 1 or 20-minute conversation in which Mr. Nadar spoke 3 sentences. And Gopal spoke all the other sentences. So I don't have great, and it was a unique experience. If you want to ask me about it later, you can, but it was just an incredible experience. It taught me a lot from that experience. There was only Mr. Nadar and me, and that's when I joined the Shiv Nadar Foundation. But you know what? I have interviewed more than 3,000 candidates in the last 10 years. So I have a great deal of experience on the other side. So what I'm going to talk to you about is this. What you should probably never do in an interview. I can cover a few really funny moments. And I will tell you what I think is a 7-minute secret of interviews. What's a 7-minute secret? And maybe I'll tell you some other stories. So that's what you have in front of you. This is what you will cover. We could now exit this. I hope this goes off. And did I put everything off? No. Here, we are back. Okay, you can see me? Okay, great. So, over the next maybe 20 minutes, I'll just say a few things. I want to provoke questions from you, provoke thought, and maybe you could ask me, because one thing is for sure, unless you're joining your father's business, father or mother's business, or grandfather's business, which must be about 1 or 2%, all of you will definitely go through a process of interviews and meeting people, and you're going to put your best foot forward, right? And whether that happens or not, when you meet boyfriends and girlfriends and future boyfriends and girlfriends and people you're going to get married, all those are interviews, okay? So maybe some of the things that I share with you may be valuable to you. Okay. Now, there are 3 parts to this. 2 parts, some of the things I share with you or the CDC team shares with you could be valuable to you because you're on the business end of it. 6 months later, 3 months later. Anubha, when do they start meeting prospective companies, etc.? How many months from now for the fourth year and third year?
At the end of third year, but students who also apply for internships these days have to go for interviews, Gopal.
That's very soon, right?
Yeah, it could be in the second year, it could be in the third year. Interviews are part of life now.
Okay. So, the first and foremost, the really interesting part is normally these interviews take 30 minutes to 1 hour. It's not like the selecting to the army, which takes 3 days and things like that. In 35 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, they're going to decide whether you're a good candidate or not. By the way, that's my 7-minute secret. That in all the 3,000 odd people that I would have met in the last 10 years, you must know that generally it takes about 7 minutes to know whether the person is the right candidate or not the right candidate. For the rest of the time, people are just being polite to you because they can't tell you to go after 7 minutes. But actually, they're not just being polite to you, they're actually trying to validate whether that initial impression is right or the initial impression is wrong. Because senior people are fairly sharp, they understand who fits into their organization. Considering the fact that the competence part, as I told you, or the skill part has been done. So those are very specific. You must know your subject. You must know the job for which you're going. That is a different competency assessment. Sure, your CGPA or the institute that you come from will give them a fair idea of that competence, of that knowledge for which you're being taken. But people are not taking you for knowledge only. That's like a given. If somebody is come out of a business school from the Shiv Nadar University, they expect a particular level of competence. But they're looking, is there a role fit? Is there an institutional fit? Then I was talking to Gaurav here in my team, and he said in one of the companies, in Urban Ladder, apparently the CEO says after 30 lakhs, we are looking for a soul searching fit and not really a competence fit. Right? When you look at what Mr. Narayanan mentioned to us a few days ago, it's about that. Are you institutionally fitting? Right? Now, therefore, there are 3 parts of what we can talk about. One is, what should you do inside that interview room when you step in through the door? Maybe we can give you a few tips because we have all these experiences. Second is, what can you do as preparation for the last 1 week, last 1 month, last 2 weeks, etc. Maybe we can give you a tip. But the third part, which is who you should be, is a minimum 4-5 year effort. No tips is going to help you. You're not going to get compassion because Gopal told you must have compassion. Right? You're not going to be creative because somebody said be creative. You've got to be creative. You're not going to be curious also. But remember, when you go in through the door, they're checking whether the person seems to have compassion, whether the person has creativity. All that is being checked. That is you, the human being. And that's why I say, for example, hiding behind these videos by putting your video off looks a bit crazy to me. And the pandemic happened, Baba. Now to say, my background's not okay and my home is seen, and how are you going to survive in the world if your face can't be seen by your teacher or your professor, right? I went into a grade 12 class in Shiv Nadar school 2 weeks ago. It's a foundation. It's an internal secret. So I'm sharing it with you. And when I saw half the videos off, I walked out. Right? Not walked out physically through the door. I just said, listen, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to be with 17-year-olds who want to put their videos off when I'm talking to them. I said, thank you very much. And of course, there was all consternation because when the CEO walks out so-called angry, everybody's, did soul searching, including principals and a lot of people. But you are 17 to 20, 21 years old. You don't want to show your face and, you don't want to be in class. That doesn't work. Okay. When because your personality is what is seen. Your personality is where you know whether there's a fit or a no fit, right? So I told you the 7-minute secret already. Now I have to tell you about what happens when you walk in through the door, right? When you walk in through the door, people notice very quickly how are you dressed, by the way, right? And it's very interesting. My son, who went to St. Stephen's, much older than you now, he's like 29. Throughout his college life, he used to go in shorts and chappals to college, right? And you know, the army man, your son going in shorts and chappals, very embarrassing. And throughout I used to tell him, how can you go in chappals to your college? So he said, hey, shut up. You know, sons can tell their fathers, shut up, because when you're 17, 18, you'll always tell your father. Now, fortunately, he doesn't, but he did. And he said, you know, shut up. That's the way it is. That's how college life is. When he went for his first couple of interviews, white shirt, black trouser, all that. I said, well, now what happened? Go in chappals and go in your torn jeans and let's see what happens. Now suddenly everybody wants to be well dressed. You want to go for your interviews, you'll notice. So the point is, how you dress matters. Don't be too loud and you can be an artistic person. If you're Picasso, you will get away with the way you're dressed. For all the rest of us, dress properly. Okay? Don't be too loud. Don't be too badly stayed. Because if you're an artist, go whichever way. Wear chappals, wear kurtas, wear a torn jubba and all that. It's all fine. But if you're going for a normal job, people are going to notice if you're dressed funnily. That's one. Look people in the eye. Look at everybody you see. Look people in the eye. Smile. Even if you are nervous, smile. You know Sri Ravi Shankar? I did his 1 week course long time ago, 20 years ago. One of the lessons they tell you is smile. Fake it till you get it. Fake it till you get it. Which means, listen, smile should be part of your life. If you're not natural at smiling, fake it. But even faking is better. But this is 30 seconds. Forget about 7 minutes, 30 seconds. They walk in through the door. They say, is this a pleasant person walking in? Right? Now, here is what you should never do. Don't put your handbag on the table. I don't know. We have sometimes people come, they think the handbag, because it's cost 50,000 rupees, it has to be seen. You put the handbag on the table. But it's very irritating for people. Right? So don't do things like putting the handbag on the table, because it is, what is a brand called? Anyway, so I've tried to ask, why is the handbag on the table? Because the ladies who are with me on the panel, they said, because it is so-and-so brand, that's why it's on the table. But you made a bad impression. Right. Now, when you start speaking, what people notice is what Mr. Narayanan said, don't multitask. Listen carefully. Are you concentrating? Are you letting the person finish the sentence before you want to answer? Are you thinking before you are answering? Right? How are people noticing whether you are humble? Because when people see a very confident person, when a panel sees very confident people, so these are the interesting things. When you see a confident person, you know what they want to see next? Anyone, unmute and try. You see a very confident person, 5-7 minutes, you say very confident. Please unmute and just tell me. What? Can they unmute, Dominic?
Okay. Not all have
access. No. So then chat, please. When you see a very confident person, what do you think they're trying to see next? Oh, I can't see the chats, is it?
So we have Ramakrishna.
Attitude, very nice. Somebody said Shawang. Is that the name? Shawang? Humble people. How humble or grounded, says Divya. Ramakrishnan Bhattabeyal says humility. Absolutely right. So you remember that people want to see confident people, but the moment they see confident people, they say, overconfident? Then they'll puncture you a little bit to say, is there humility? They'll say opposite of what you say, because all they're trying to say is there humility. Yesterday I met a candidate and I said, what are you good at between this and this? And he said, I'm good at everything. So I said, neither is this person thinking, nor is this person humble. because it's a choice which is given. And it is an interview yesterday, right? Nobody should say who's 35 years old that I'm good at everything, because nobody is good at everything. Because you should say, okay, this is what I'm really good at, but I'm okay with this also. So the other thing, therefore, is people see is, are you humble? They look for credibility. This is again something which Mr. Narayan. How do you know credibility? Okay, so for example, we'll ask questions like, what do your friends say about you? Right? But people are trying to say, trying to figure, is the person credible? And is the person reflective? So some of this stuff, as I'm saying, some is what you can do physically into an interview because you were coached and trained and all that. But a lot of it also happens. So I'm just leaving it at that. You can ask me more questions and I'll go back to saying, what can you do to prepare? Now, do not go for a company interview or to meet somebody senior, for example, without doing homework. If you don't know what the company does, for example, imagine someone who comes for a Shiv Nadar school interview and halfway through that, you say, by the way, do you know who's Mr. Shiv Nadar? And that very competent person who seems so good, fantastic CV, he says, no, but I'm guessing he owns a Shiv Nadar school. So straight away from that impression, it goes zoom down. Because if the person doesn't know that Mr. Shiv Nadar is the founder of HCL, and which is a very short answer, means the person did zero homework. What were you doing yesterday when you knew there's an interview call for you? Right? So be prepared, know your company, always ask someone, HR tells you that so you're going to meet so-and-so, say who's the person? Go and read the LinkedIn profile, figure a little bit, right? Always makes a good impression. But you must know the company, you must know the person, and you must have, if you're going for senior positions, which you will in 10, 15 years from now, you must know a lot more than just the broad understanding of the company. You must know the role that you're going to do, what was the past record, etc., etc. There are many things that you should know, but do your homework, right? Don't walk in somewhere expecting that because of my wonderful 6 feet 2 inches height and a lovely personality, I'm going to get selected. If you don't do your homework, people are not going to think too much of you. So do your homework about the company and about the people you're going to meet. It always is very insightful to meet somebody who's done lots of homework about the company. And so, for example, I'll give you an example. My daughter always wanted to work in sports management. She went to Australia and did sports management, and she worked as a waitress in a Melbourne hotel so that she could not make her father pay for all her fees, which I couldn't anyway afford. And she learned a lot about Australia, Australian football. And one day, like the MCG test, which is going on now, the Sydney Cricket Ground test is going on, but at Melbourne, there was a cricket match going on. And she was a sports management student. She was asked to be a hostess because of her background and all that in the VIP room. And there were lots of senior people, including the head of Cricket Australia. And he started talking to her. And he realized that she knows heck of a lot about basketball in Australia. His closest friend was the head of Basketball Australia. And in that room, he called up the head of Basketball Australia and he said, hey, Bill, you must meet this girl I just met. She's just incredibly knowledgeable. She works for Basketball Australia now. She's been six years there. She's a manager. Remember that life is about chances and these sort of things which happen, right? A lot of it is about that. But these chances and lucky breaks, etc., happen because you demonstrate something about something, and those are visible. And your knowledge needs to be very wide. It has to be beyond just the subject. And that is very exciting in an interview, right? We have, by the way, Shiv Nadar University, 2 people from Shiv Nadar University, after doing their engineering at the Shiv Nadar school. One of them is teaching dance. and she did, I think, a minor in dance at the Shiv Nadar University, but she's just such, Niharika is her name. She's just such an incredible person. But, you know, that is a very interesting thing in many professions today. They look for people with diverse skill sets, diverse interests, and deep knowledge about things other than just what you're interviewing for. That shows a very well-rounded person. And of course, communication skills goes without saying. You may be an expert in your subject, but your communication skills are increasingly important. So make sure that you work on those things. If you're from a particular background where communication skills was not natural, work on it. And you can work on it for 3-4 years is a long time in a college to be able to work on it. So these are all some of the things that you could do in terms of preparation, right? I have to tell you some of the funny things you shouldn't do, right? I told you a couple of them. Don't try chappals, right? You may love perfume, but don't do over perfume because some people may just not like perfume. I've seen that, right? It's not. Some people may not like loud clothes, in the sense that just be regular. It's a safer way to be, right? Some people may not like excessive belief in God. Some people may not like zero belief in God. So those are things it's better to stay moderate, right? Because it depends on what if you're going to a school with too much of belief, for example, in one particular religion or something like that, it becomes a little bit of it. So you don't need extreme. You may have a particular view, that's your personal life, but those things you have to look at what's the company culture, how does it go with that culture, and those things are very important. But I'll just leave with a couple of contradictions because you people typed very quickly. Let's say that you come across a person and you're looking at two things. You come across a person with great candor. Candor means honesty, right? Straightforwardness, right? And what do you think is the opposite of that? The moment they see candor, somebody speaks his mind and say, you know, I don't think this is right. You're right. What do you think is the next thing they're looking for? A bit of an opposite. You can type. Restraint, says Ramakrishnan. Radhika says conflict. No, opposite of good judgment, Harshvardhan. Diplomacy, not rudeness. Okay, maturity, right? So obviously, there's nothing wrong being candid and honest. But then people will say, is there maturity here? Because candidness and honesty is good if there's maturity and balance. And that is something that is nice, which must come through. One for sure, and that's among the last of many things I can share with you, but one for sure is curiosity. When somebody throws something to you, which suggests like they're dangling something for you to pick up, they'll notice whether you're curious enough to know more. It could be something about the company, it could be something about the work, but curiosity is it's instantly appreciated. A curious person means a creative person. A well-read person suggests a curious person, right? A person who has diverse interests suggests a curious person and a creative person. So these are some of the things that people definitely look for. Now, coming back to the thing about how you can prepare, yesterday I was talking to a group of people, senior people actually, and they said, how can I be less nervous in an interview? There's one really good way to be less nervous. Anyone? I'm looking at chat. How can you be less nervous? Suppose you are a nervous type and you think it's very important to come through in this interview. What's one way to be less nervous? Practice. Saran, Boduluri Saran says practice. Okay. But I'll give you a very simple tip. Meditation. Ranbir, okay. Drink lots of water, is it? Well prepared. Yeah, be well prepared. Okay, so I'll give you a simple tip. Never believe that anything which is to happen must happen. Right? Your life doesn't depend on everything which must happen. If it has to happen, it'll happen later. If it is good, it will happen. Have some faith in things outside of yourself. When you put too much of pressure on yourself, then you get nervous. Don't put pressure. It's okay. Okay? It is important. You must know the company. You must do your homework. You must feel very eager that I love this job. But you have to tell yourself mentally, so what if I don't get it? It's okay. Right? Then you will be less nervous. Right? You'll be more natural. You'll be just yourself. And the most important tip actually is to be yourself. Because when you're yourself, you'll fit into the company which suits you. You will fit into the group which suits you. You don't need to be somebody else. If you're somebody else and that's what somebody sees, and then you go into the organization, it doesn't suit you, it doesn't suit the organization. Okay, so that's broadly what I had to share with you. I'm sort of done. I'm ready to take conversations and questions and see what you would like to ask me.
Gopal, I'll come in on your last point. This is something which whenever I take student sessions, I tell them, while many of you have either gone through interviews and you will go through interviews once you're settled in life. I mean, when you become mature and in your workplace, you'll hopefully go for an interview once in 2 years, a formal employment interview, but otherwise you will keep on going through interviews. Interview is not you getting selected or rejected. It is a fitment. You are interviewing the organization as much as the organization is interviewing you. It's never about an organization selecting you or rejecting you. When you get into a discussion with an organization, you bring forth your qualities, your attributes, your skills to a job description, to a role. And that's true even for a higher education program. Even when you apply for a certain course overseas, there's a certain university which selects you. There's a certain university for a certain course which does not select you. But they are also doing a fitment, whether you are suitable to their culture, to this particular course. So don't look at it as you getting selected or you getting rejected. Both of you are absolutely equally powerful. There's a candidate, there's an organization. There's a person who's wanting to get into a relationship with another person. If you make a wrong match, it's terrible to get into a job where you will not do well and then keep struggling and then looking for other opportunities. That's first point. Second, I'll take you back to 7 years back. 8 years back. We were starting our first recruitment season, students. One of them, all my students are my favorite. I regard and have lots of affection for each one of you. But there was one girl I was particularly fond of in that particular batch. She was a Triple E student, very bright. There was something about her which was very good. She got rejected at 21 interviews. The confidence that that girl exhibited, after each and every interview, she would come back and say, ma'am, maybe I could have done this better. 21 interviews getting rejected over a period of 4 months is terrible for any young student to go through. Now, when I go and meet her at her office, it's a proud moment for me. She welcomes me to her office. She gives me a cup of coffee. Every time I go and meet her, I get teary-eyed because I've seen her rise through so much, and I can tell you so many such stories. I just want to tell all of you, Col.Gopal being aside, you all are like our babies. There is nobody who can reject you. Nobody who can reject you. It's only about fitment. You bring to the table some things which is very special. You have to just meet the right organization. We can't fall in love with everybody, right? Similarly, we can't get into an organization, do all roles. Something is there for us. Sometimes it takes us a little bit more time. All right, I thought I should say that before your question answers start.
And in my SSB in 1977, I had a friend who I met during the SSB in Bangalore, and I said, it was my first SSB. And I asked him, is this your first SSB? He said, no, fourth. So which means every 6 months he was trying and trying and trying. He came to the NDA, batchmate. In the NDA, there are 2 top appointments out of 300 odd cadets. One is called the Academy Cadet Adjutant. The other one is called the Academy Cadet Captain. He was the Academy Cadet Adjutant 3 years later. And 30 years later, he was an army commander, lieutenant general. Okay. So that's how it is. If you're sure of what you want to do, you try and you still get there. And I spoke to him last month, and he was a very famous general of the army. So don't worry about somebody didn't select you. It's what Anuba ma'am is saying. Okay, let's go. Conversations, questions. Dominic, over to you.
You can unmute. Everyone, you can. So, Siddhant.
You can directly ask questions, right, Dominic?
Yes. Siddhant.
Oh, hello, good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
Siddhant, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. So, sir, like I have like actually not one question. It's like a two-part question. So, firstly, like this is I'm asking from my own experience. So, basically, like often it happens that the interviewer asks you a question to whose answer you do not know. But so, can you like actually like do like what you call play around that? Basically,
No.
you state some of the things that you know, but
No.
Like
I
that
think,
way.
see, there are only 2 types of questions. One is a factual question. One is a esoteric philosophical question. Right, Siddhant? Like, for
Yes, sir.
example, I love this sessions, by the way. It's called non-Googleable questions. For creative people like you, maybe this is homework for you. You know what are non-Googleable questions? Tell me one. Siddhant, tell me one non-Googleable question, which Google, the algorithm, does not know. It's not about you. It's not about your family. It's not personal, but it's generic. Tell me the biggest non-Googleable question, by the way, which Google doesn't know.
I'm unable to think, unable to recollect. I might know, but yeah, I'm not able to think.
This is a thought one for all of you. There's a creative question. I'm asking what's a non-Googleable question, but I'll give you one of them. Does God exist? Right? Try on Google. I'm sure Google doesn't know. Nobody knows. Okay? But obviously, it's not unimportant question because 50% of humanity believes in God, but nobody knows whether God exists or not. It's non-Googleable. It's a creative question. But obviously, there are 2 types of questions. One is factual. On a factual question, if you're asked and you don't know, you should say, I'm sorry, sir, I do not know. I'm sorry, ma'am, I do not know. Perfectly okay. And if you answer 3 times, I do not know, do not feel bad. You should only say, I should have done a little more homework, or it's okay. What you don't know, you don't know. It's factual. But does God exist? You can say many things. You can say, I believe in God. That's not, you don't have to say no or yes or whatever. You can say, I don't know whether he exists or not, but I believe. He or she, by the way. So, but what you do not know, you do not know. It's never go around and say, it's perfectly okay. We've taken lots of people who didn't know questions which were even factual, which we didn't know, because what you're trying to see is the person curious? Is the person humble? Is the person a learner? Those things don't matter. They will catch up, right? But obviously, if you're teaching, I'm only going to the teachers. If you're teaching 8th class mathematics, you better know 10th class mathematics. You can't say, I don't know 8th class mathematics, you can't teach them. So that's the competence question. But anything you don't know, always say, I do not know. I'm sorry, I do not know this.
All right, sir. Thank you. And if I may ask one more thing.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So also like often it happens that even despite a lot of preparation, you can make mistakes in the heat of the moment. So how do you counter this thing? Like it can happen, and anyone, like no matter how much you practice, there is still a small chance that you may in the heat of the moment end up making a mistake which can have like consequences.
Oh, you mean practice for the interview?
Yeah, basically practice for the interview, but despite that, like in the heat of the moment, you still have a chance.
So my short answer, students of Shiv Nadar University, is that don't practice for interviews. Practice for life. Practice being a good person. Practice being a curious person. Do not practice for interviews. Do not practice for it. There is no practice for interview. Right? You just be yourself. Be confident. Be sure. Go with the flow. Do not practice for interviews, because our country is so full of coaching and coaching and coaching for engineering and coaching for IIT and coaching for IIM and coaching for every damn thing. You think everything can be coached. You can't. The truth about life is you can't even be sure about the person you're going to get married to. That you'll know 1 or 2 years later. But you still take a decision, right? That's a big decision. So don't practice. You can't practice. You don't need to. If this question is asked, I'm going to give that answer. Forget it. You look at the question, let your mind think, let your brain think, let your heart speak and answer. And if you make a mistake, you say, by the way, that's another thing. People put you into bind because it's very interesting. The more confident the person is, sometimes the more sure you are, the more pushed you get in interviews, because people want to know how deep the person is. Then you start, so because they're and people are experts, HR people and senior people in organizations, they try to push you. And then they make sure, like I said, the 7-minute rule, they're saying they validate the fact that looks like a great candidate. Or they say, oh, did we make a mistake? Right? So don't practice. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
I'll come in here. I'll add to this. Whilst, Colonel Gopal is talking about to be yourself in your interview, one good thing which students can do. You can't muck up answers, but you have your resume in front of you, right? You've done your schooling from a certain place, you've done majors in something, you've done minor in something, you've done a project, let's say, in collaboration with some other university, maybe you've done internship somewhere. It's good to have a rough sheet of your printout of your resume and just put down a couple of things. Okay, in this internship which I did 2 years back, what did I learn? It's just good to remember that. It's just good to remember and just write down, okay, when I'd gone to Tata Steel in Jamshedpur, when I'd got down from the train and I'd gone to this hugely big plant, I had learned something in my engineering class. My faculty taught me so beautifully, but actually when I saw it there, this is how the classroom came into light. So those little things, how do those boilers look, whatever, whether you do study sociology, whether you do English, whatever you study in class has an application in real life also. And that's where your internships would have come into place. Maybe you led something in your project. It's good to just revisit, not practice it, but to write down, okay, this is what I would have learned somewhere. That's what, when people tell you about practice, maybe this is what they mean, that maybe you'll get, you might, rather than freezing during an interview, if you've written a few notes that this is what I would have done in my internship 3 years back, or I volunteered for a particular project. Maybe I remember a couple of students also volunteered when the tsunami first came in. They went all the way from Shiv Nadar University and they went to Chennai and they helped out even during Chennai floods. At that time, so much is happening to you. You're flooded with emotion and work. So just write down a couple of things, and that's the only coaching which I want from you, nothing else. I thought I should say that. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Divya, you've asked a very nice question. Would you like to ask that so that others can hear it, those who haven't seen the chat? We can. Oh, you can't unmute.
No, you can unmute. IT, please unmute all the students who are raising hands.
Divya Verma.
Divya, you can ask now. I think you unmuted.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. So I was actually asked this question, and I think this is the question why I did not get the job probably. So they asked me, how would you deal if you think that the decision that your manager take is not in the favor of the company, and will you risk going against like him and report it to the senior management?
Okay, excellent. So very good question. Now I'm going to ask you, what did you say in the interview?
I think I said that yes, I would probably go to the senior management and report. But then they questioned me again that that is very subjective. How do you know that what you are saying is correct? And but your manager is so experienced. How will you? How are you willing to go against him? He has been in the company for so long. So I got tongue tied then.
Okay. So, by the way, just in case you think that this is not important thing and they're just trying to ask you this question, this is a deeply ethical question. It's a question about you, and like Anubha ma'am said, it's about whether you fit into the organization, right? It depends on the company, it depends on how serious they are. By the way, these sort of things happen to you all the time. Yes. Especially when you're in your 20s and your 30s, right? So it's a real situation that will happen. So while, as I said, there is no right or wrong answer for an interview, the answer is definitely not to say, no, I will not go to the senior management. The answer may not be also to say, I will go to the senior management. So what could be the right answer? We only play acting in an interview right now, right? So the point is, you've got to consider about what is bad for the organization. For example, it's a safety issue, it's an integrity issue, it's an ethical issue. You have to draw a line and say, this will not go past me and I must understand it. And therefore, the first thing to do is to confront your manager. Now, when you confront your manager, you confront the manager in a right way, not by saying, you bloody stupid fellow, you don't know what you're doing, I disagree with you. You don't have to say any of that. You have to just say, Mr. So-and-so, Sir so-and-so, Madam so-and-so, by the way, I came to know of this. Do you think it's okay? Have a conversation. And someone taught me this beautifully. He said, when you disagree with your boss, you must do 3 pitches. Anyone plays baseball or knows baseball rules? And what's a pitch? You know what's a pitch? You get 3 times to throw the ball. It's called 3 pitches, right? And then you get strikeout. So which means that don't let it go if it troubles you. You have to tell your boss 3 times. And 3rd time, then you take that decision. If it doesn't sit well with you, you have to tell him, listen, this doesn't sit well. Maybe I am definitely going to raise this. Because then also in those 3 pitches, you will know whether you are right or your manager is right. Maybe there was something which the manager has seen which you don't know. So it's important to not in the first instance, not go back to your manager and just go and tell your senior manager, that's not okay. But you definitely have to understand everything. And if you think it's against safety, against ethics, against, women's rights, for example, those are things that you must stand up for and go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, not related at all, but Divya, this is important for young students. Ever so often when, especially in your 0 to 2 years, not even 0 to 2 years, 0 to 1 year of work experience in an organization, because you're coming from a very safe environment. Universities are very safe. Your families are very safe. You have the right to walk in. One faculty, if you've had a bad day with another faculty, there's a transition period where you start working. During those 6 months, during the first 1 year, it happens many times that you may feel that, okay, this particular person is not hearing my voice, but let me go to another person. Okay. It tells your manager whether you are okay to work in a certain structure or not. It's, of course, you have to bring to light if something is unethical. But if it's not anything to do with ethics and it's nothing to do with your safety as a woman, as an employee, then you also have to work in a team, right? Many times the first few months of an employee becomes very difficult because they feel that, okay, this is my young boss, he's got 4 to 5 years. I've faced it many times. My team member could be a certain, maybe let's say 2 years work experience or 0 months of work experience. They just come in, join my team, but their reporting manager is somebody else. But they feel that the reporting manager has not listened to them. Let me go to a step higher. It's not it's not perceived rightly. Okay, for various reasons. One, you have to work in a team. There is a discipline to it. There's a structure to it. So if it's nothing to do with ethics, my advice would be do look at what your team dynamics are.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was great advice. I'll keep that in mind.
Harsh, you have a brilliant question, and I'm going to give you a simple rule for that. Harsh, do you want to unmute yourself and ask, because it will be helpful for others?
Okay, so hi, good afternoon, sir. Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the things that I think Dominic, sir, in fact, I think he would know precisely, and any of the CDC trainers, they have consistently asked me to, speak less, hear more, but that's something that I am not very used to. I tend to over-explain things towards the end of it, especially technical questions, and this has obviously been the bane of me. And I think when you described your interview with Mr. Shiv Nadar, that's what reminded me of it. And I think in your situation, it might have worked really well, but in most cases, it does not. Like, for example, one of the interviews that I went to, I I think the first technical interview went really well. The second one, we were stuck on one question throughout, and towards the end of it, I finally realized that they were asking for a different approach, which wasn't really the case, and that took up most of the time. And then there were no questions left to be asked. So how exactly do I sync with the interviewer? How do I understand what they are trying to communicate in terms of their and especially I think the second part to that would also be that when I'm trying to gauge what the interviewer wants to know and their cameras are switched off, how do I do that? Like, how do I pick up from their voice modulation and etc. I know it might be slightly difficult in those terms, but yeah.
Anuba, this is becoming an epidemic problem. Camera switched off by the person who's interviewing. That looks really strange. You mean, Harsh, that you've been in interviews where the person who's interviewing has got cameras off?
Yes, I think it's pretty frequent actually. I think the first person that I interviewed with in the company itself, like in the end, there were 6 people left. 2 of them got eliminated the first round. The first round, the person had their cameras on. The second round, they did not. But yeah, I mean, you can't really tell them that, sir, could you switch on the camera, because that's...
Don't join companies where the person who's interviewing has got his camera switched off. That's my advice.
No. Harsh.
Okay, just a minute, Anuba.
Let me give you the other perspective also.
No, Anuba, just a minute. First and foremost, I just want to answer specifically about what you were asking by what was Mr. Narayanan's first C? Students of SNU. What was C number 1? The 61-year-old are picking up from 62-year-old Mr. Narayanan, then you people, it was meant for you. What is C number 1?
Clarity. Yeah, sir.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful. So, by the way, the first thing is clarity. When a question is asked, Harsh, you know what you could do? It'll be very delightful for the interviewer that you take a watch which has the seconds thing and you put it in front of you. Somebody may ask you, why have you got this clock? Right? And a watch. You can say, sir, I tend to overstate things. I've decided that I will not talk for more than 2 minutes when a question is asked. Very disarming. You will get lots of points for it and you will follow that rule. No question needs to be answered by more than 2 minutes. Maximum 3 minutes. Maximum. And if you think you haven't finished enough, that means there is a problem with clarity and clarity of communication. You haven't heard the question well. Nobody wants 10 minutes answers. Nobody wants 5 minutes answers. They want to know, have you picked it up? Are you answered it sharp and sweet? And if you think that it's a little less, you can say, sir or madam, would you like me to elaborate more? Which is fine. Okay. If you think that they haven't understood enough, then you can elaborate more. But the golden rule for you is to say that I have a 2-minute clock or a 3-minute clock. And that's it. Never speak more. And by the way, Mr. Nadar, very good question. Mr. Nadar, because I was meeting a giant, right? And I was expecting him to ask questions. And Mr. Nadar, if you know or don't know, and Anuba ma'am and I know him now a lot more, he has moods. He either will speak or he will not speak. I've seen him in a whole day not saying anything. But he's the most unusual, among the most unusual human beings I've ever met, right? And he chose not to speak to me. So, I mean, then you have to speak. By the way, I'll tell you what happened. He said, Colonel Gopal, this meeting is about you. Tell me in about 10 minutes about your childhood. Tell me in about 15 minutes about your life in the army. And tell me in about 20 minutes what you're doing right now, currently. So he already gave me the cue, what he wants to hear. And I have a long life, so I have a long story. So I kept waiting, but he kept nodding and he didn't say anything. I kept waiting, he kept nodding. So I kept going on and on and on. And I reached 1990, I was already 30 years old. And then he said, by this time you must have been married. So I realized he wants to know about the family. So I explained that. Then I went 10 more years. I had become commanding officer by then. But he never asked a second question. I kept waiting. Then he said, it's like God, isn't it? So I was surprised that somebody like Mr. Nadar knows the commanding officer is called God in the unit. You know, in the army we say that. So I said, pardon me, sir. He said, I heard it's called like God. I said, yes, the army, we say commanding officer. I finished 10 more years and then I reached the end of my life. And then he said, do you enjoy what you do? Those are the 3 questions he asked me. But that's unusual, right? And that's a senior position. So he's an incredible listener. He's an incredible listener. So anyway, I can tell you many stories about Mr. Nadar, but this is about you. Okay. Adya?
Colonel Gopal, if I can add to Harsh's question.
Yeah, sure.
The length of the interview. Harsh, it depends upon what are you applying for. If you are, for example, if you're giving either a core interview or a subject-based interview or a tech interview, for example, each question will have 45 minutes of code writing, okay, which you will have to explain and you'll have to do problem solving, right? Now, from a fresh perspective, when you're talking about a fresh student who has 0 experience, if you're talking about an organization evaluating you, they will evaluate you on your subject knowledge, right? They are not talking about your work experience, right? They are not talking so much right now about your leadership skills. They want to understand your potential of leading teams, right? But they are first and foremost interested whether the 4 years that you've spent in the university, whatever you present as a candidate, can you justify that? For example, 2 questions which we are asked often is, ma'am, what about GPA? What about marks? We are not, what about, why are we getting answer questions only on, let's say, my mechanical engineering, thermodynamics, or why are we getting questions only on coding? That's what you've done so far. So they will ask you questions on the fact that 80% of your time, 70% of your time, 60%, which is also majority of your time, is spent in the classroom. So if a student is being able to clearly enunciate, answer logically, that means you're attending class, that means you have discipline, all of the softer qualities come out very clearly when you answer with whatever you answer. So time limit, for business school students, it may be different, right? But if you're answering for a certain specific issue or a certain specific problem, you will have many long hours. So stamina for a fresh student for giving interviews, stamina is very much there. You will come into the interview bay, if you were physically coming to our bay, which is the CDC bay, at about 8 o'clock in the morning. You will not leave before 11 p.m. So you will take washroom breaks standing outside in the cold. You will grab a meal right there. You will ensure your little bag has a perfume. I remember we keep all these things in the. But stamina is important. You need to have the ability to sit down and go for the long haul that I have to now answer this one question for 1 hour. It will happen. It will happen. Right. But we are talking about the domain interviews, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'd like to also clarify. Remember, I said right in the beginning, that my conversation with you is not about domain and not about skill sets, because when you're young, a lot of companies are looking for the broad basic domain and skill sets which fits that role that you're going to do initially, right? And that is very different for different companies, obviously. But I was talking about all the rest of the interesting 9 C's which he said, which were not related to competence. And those are the
So,
competence
yeah.
ones, right? Yeah.
So
And
if I may, I think,
Krishnan, sorry. Yes,
yeah,
Harsh?
so please go ahead. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, I said, Krishnan, you want to unmute and ask? Yeah. Krishnan, I think we can't hear you, right?
Can't hear you, Krishnan.
We can't hear you. So I'll read out your question. Krishnan saying, if you do not clear the interview for 3 to 4 times and is selected at the 4th time, how do you look at this person? Is that person failed to display the potential previous attempts, or is it that the one who interviewed failed to judge the candidate in earlier attempts? I gave you this example of a 17-year-old boy who went for the SSB for the 4th time. Okay. And people know in the interview panel that he's come for the 4th time. Just no problem. I do not see that as an issue. There is a role fit which is looked at, and that's the role fit which people are looking at. You could have improved. You could have said the right things at that particular point. Maybe the role fit is for something which is slightly different. In this case, he was still going to join the same army, and because he was rejected 3 times doesn't mean there was a problem. Not only became the ACA of the academy of my batch, he went on to become a general. Right? So that's a great example. Don't worry. In fact, if you say that I want to go for the Google interview 20 times, it means Google should be very impressed by saying he doesn't want to go anywhere else. So it's always a good thing. Adya, you have a question. Adya, you need to be unmuted. Adya Gupta, you have a question.
Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't have a question. I just wanted to add to your answer to Harsh's question. When it comes to, so the problem that he pointed out, I've also gone through job interviews, and I have frankly sat only for one interview, and that was a job I was hired for. And what helped me answering technical questions, especially for a position that you're interviewing for, is that you just don't jump in when you're asked a question, especially when it's about judging your problem solving skills or your analytical skills. You always, I found it very helpful, and I think it was appreciated by my interviewers as well. If you ask for a minute or two to think the question through, so that clarity bit of your answer is reflected when you finally present your answer. So when you think about the answer, you're going to end up taking that minute to think about the problem, end up structuring it, and then present it in a short manner so you avoid verbosity, which is the problem that Harshvardhan pointed out with his interviews sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Adya. That's very good advice. You can come and take this lecture yourself, Adya. You're absolutely right.
No, sir. Not at all.
No, you're absolutely right. That's a brilliant input. When you feel flustered or you feel that you need a little more time, it comes out very well when the person says, can I take a minute to think? It comes out very well, right? Which means you're reflective, you want to be clear, and you are going to take time. It comes out very well. Don't jump into answering. It's a very good point. Excellent. Okay. We have... there's a question here. Kante was asking. Okay. This is a very good question. Jayati? Are we good for time, Dominic?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Jayati?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask you that what are some of those habits that you unconsciously inculcated while you were growing up? And today, when you look back, you feel that those habits have helped you grow and become what you are, that people of our age can inculcate too.
Well, this is a very personal question, isn't it? And it's a very good question from the interviewer's perspective, because it shows, one, whether you're reflective, And even if you're not, and you take time off, like Adya says, you take a minute and say, I haven't thought of it. And you know the last person who I heard in an interview who was asked this question very recently? Roshni Nadu Malhotra, by someone called Fred Swaniker, who is the head of the African Leadership Academy. And Fred had this interview, and the moment the question was asked, I looked at Roshni and the interview and I said, she's not thought this one before. But the most beautiful part is she reflected on it and she responded, which for us means, what does Mr. and Mrs. taught young Roshni when she was a kid, right? But it was brilliant, because those are maybe sort of questions you can prepare for, but it tells the interviewer deeply who you are. It tells whether you're reflective. It tells whether, did you pick up the right things when you were young? And of course, it tells whether your parents taught you the right things, right? For example, Roshni said to stay grounded. Okay. So if her father taught her, mother taught her to stay grounded, that's fantastic. To be empathetic to people, right? So those were some of the things which come through very well. But it just shows whether you're reflective and whether you pick up the right things as you go through the journey of life. Yeah.
Okay, sir. And I still have your squash racket that me and my friend had come up to you in HCL Hackathon, and we asked a picture with you, and you said that if both of you come and play squash with me in ISC today, only then I will give you a picture. And you gave us a picture, and then we had to come, and we still have that racket with us locked up in the hostel room.
Oh, wonderful. Listen, we are waiting okay, you're the first very big group of people. They're like 200 people, 300 people between YouTube and here. Okay, so, we are so excited about one thing. There are 16 new things at the Shiv Nadar University campus, which you will see when you come back.
Okay.
And one of them, of course, I'm sure you know, which is the horses. There are 4 beautiful horses on campus. There are 100 cycles on campus, which you can cycle from one side to the other. It's never going to be locked. It's all open. You can just go from A to B. But Jayati, to answer that squash question, you have a 21-year-old squash coach who's already, with the few students that are here, he's made that squash coach so full of life. There are lots of people playing squash, and there are 2 students who are on sports squash scholarship, squash students on scholarship from the Jindal Academy, who are nationally ranked, both girls. So there are a lot of, now you can figure the rest of the 13 or 14 that you will see when you come back.
And it's just because that you said that I'll only give a picture if you come, that we both were like, we have to go no matter how tired we are after the day. And from then we started going. But that was the first time. Before that, we didn't know anything about that.
Wonderful. That is great to see. And I look forward to playing squash with you when you're back.
Yes, sir, surely.
There's a question from Rohit. Rohit been wanting to ask a question for Rohit. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Dominic, just me. Colonel Gopal did not mention the fact that there are he has many great habits. Jayati, what I admire about him, besides his work competence and leadership, I'm not going to get into that. Something which you can pick up is his love of books and his love of sports. These are 2 things which he has as habits. Maybe he would have picked up when he was growing up. Maybe his parents gave that to him, both sports and books, which I think is helping him even today. When I see him as a leader, I realize that what all he brings to the table because of him being an avid sports person and a sports lover, because you can lead that much more. And from a woman's perspective, Jayati, whilst times have changed, I am, your parents' age, but as a woman, it's so important for you to play a sport. Okay, so do pick that habit from Colonel Gopal.
Yeah, and Anuba, by the way, we will never tell you her age, but she's the fittest of her age you can ever find. She goes for 5 and 10 kilometer and 20 kilometer runs. She also had COVID. I don't know if you know that, but she, I think the moment the COVID was negative, she was running again, which was a bit dangerous. But it's absolutely fantastic advice. stay fit. If 2020 has taught us one thing, it is there's nothing more important in life than your health. Right? And the first thing to do with your health, especially for all the engineering students who could be here, engineering students generally tend to believe engineering is your life. I'm just being biased and just being provocative right now, but your life is about yourself and your healthy body and your mind, and though that's your life, right? So it's very important to stay healthy. And the other thing we do a lot in the Shiv Nadar schools also, where I've been there for 10 years, is we talk a lot of books. And the reason is because books is opening you to the world beyond yourself. So stay curious, be always reading. And interestingly, I'm interviewing a lady who's 83 years old tomorrow. The book is called A Brass Notebook. She is one of the most remarkable human beings you can ever meet. Not only she is Delhi School of Economics, Oxford, London School of Economics, professor at Miranda, economist of India, but it's the most spicy story that you can ever expect an 83-year-old to write. It is all about her love tangles and her escapades. I'm not saying more, that she had through her life. And she was known for her beauty and her brains when she was in her 20s and 30s and 40s. So I won't tell you more. Devaki Jain, I'm interviewing her tomorrow at 2:30. The book is called The Brass Notebook. So if you really want to read it, pick it up. It's a fantastic book. It's a great slice of life.
Thank you.
But one more habit which I want all young students to pick up, and this is something which I say in my session when I take it, is you have to read the newspaper every single day. I have the luxury of traveling 2 hours to the campus every day. I don't have the luxury like Col.Gopal does and many of my colleagues who are staying on campus. It's important to read a newspaper. There are so many things. None of us are experts. Whilst I've been in this industry for so long, Col.Gopal is an amazing leader in his space. But all of us, after a particular time, will become dated. What you want in your life, Adya, what you know, Vanchika, what you know, you are young, you hear about so many more things. And we can never figure out what you may want to make of your life. But if you read every day, okay, just the newspaper, even if you sometimes glance through, but not the political newspapers, I mean a business newspaper, you will get to know so much. Just pick up any, whether it's Business Standard, whether it's Economic Times, whatever. One good newspaper every day will help you. So many times you will face, whether it's investment knowledge, whether it's investment inputs, all of these things assimilate when you build up a reading habit. Besides books, newspaper is a must do.
Absolutely. Nothing, your generation, remember, as per enough studies, people say that you're likely to do 7 different careers in your life. Okay. And this is all deeply researched because of the fact that all of you must have skill sets and not necessarily only domain expertise, right? So having a varied knowledge, and newspaper is an incredible, just an incredible thing to get that for 6 rupees or 7 rupees a day. I mean, it's ridiculous. It costs 1/3 of a samosa or 1/5 of a samosa or whatever. So not reading a newspaper, not investing in a newspaper is the dumbest thing to do, right? When you have somebody drop a paper, even if you flip through it for 3 minutes, it's better than, that one bite of samosa that you're paying extra for.
So Col.Gopal, everybody will say they've got all the newspaper apps on their phones now. They've got NDTV,
No.
they've got CNN, and they've got BBC. But
the generational problem that you have is how to spend your 24 hours. There's one change which has never happened in all of humanity, is that 24 hours have never got stretched. So your problem is how are you going to make the choices about what to do with your time? So I don't envy you. You have too many options and too much of Instagram and too much of Twitter and everything else. So God bless you. But you got to decide what you want to do.
I want to spend a few minutes on a tool which all of you need, and Colonel Gopal especially is an ace at it, and there are many other people who are an ace at it. I'm terrible at it. The art of conversation making is something, the more you grow in life, the more you need. And in fact, you grow in life if you know the art of conversation. And how do you have, I've noticed so many times some people just go into a office meeting, the first few minutes, go to a party, they meet up with strangers, and they'll just talk about so many things because there's so many things to talk about. They must be reading, they have a habit, they've just watched the match or they play a certain game. I know Colonel Gopal is a great conversationalist, and you don't realize it when you are 21, when you're 22. But one of the things which makes you the top of your game, a CEO of an organization like he is, or just somebody else, is this little thing which is art of conversation making, which comes to you, and Colonel Gopal talks about this a lot when he speaks to us, is you will have an interesting conversation with a person if you have something interesting to say, which is the depth. If you've not done anything interesting, if you don't watch a game, or if you don't play a game, or if you don't read anything interesting, or you don't take out the time to meet other people, what will you fill up this gap with? There's an awkward thing which sometimes come, and all of you know it, when we've all experienced the awkwardness which comes when we say, "Acha, ab kya bole? What do we say now? What is the next sentence?" It happens to, I don't know, Vanchika is smiling. It happens to me a lot. Okay, in my job is sales, but I still sometimes struggle. Okay, I've smiled. मैं और कितना smile करूँ यार? I'm aching. What else do I say now? And then I look at people like Colonel Gopal. Dominic, I know, is excellent. Neha in my team is fantastic. There are some people who just know how to fill this vacuum, this air, with just warmth and bubbles, and they talk about random things. But I realize later that it's not random. It's because they've done so many things in life, that they'll, somebody will talk about, okay, today I noticed there was this, what, today I was going down the road, I saw this beautiful tree. They'll just make peons out of that only. So art of conversation, please do course on that. And CDC will also offer a course on that, and observe people like Dominique, Colonel Gopal, who are absolutely excellent at it. I am the awkward geek here.
Yes,
Not at all.
There was Rohit Tiwari who's been wanting to ask a question for a while. Rohit, you can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Dominic, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. It's always a joy hearing from you. It's always a joy hearing from you. I did discuss this thing with you during our walk, but I didn't ask the solution for it. So we hear a lot from sports personalities that process is very important in the result. We should always focus on the process rather than focusing on the result. But I didn't ask one thing, which was how to do it. So that is very important. I just wanted to ask. I thought this is the best platform where I can ask it. So I thought I should go for it. So I just want to know, sir, how to focus on the process rather than focusing on the result, which is the outcome.
The problem with me is you go beyond 1 hour, I will keep throwing books at you. So here's another book called Obliquity. Please write it down. Obliquity, the current book I'm reading. Obliquity. I think the professor's name is Dr. K. I don't remember the first name. Just Google Obliquity. It's an incredibly interesting book. It says that the things that you want in your life are not achieved by a direct approach, but they are achieved by an indirect approach. So which means that it's not necessary. Do you have the name of the author?
John K.
John K. K-A-Y. Okay. Well, a very interesting book, and it could be very interesting for you, especially as you approach interviews and new companies, and whether you follow a process or you go straight. See, one thing is for sure, people in interviews do look whether you're execution oriented. But there are some things in interviews you cannot know, by the way. And there's enough research to say. One of them is to know whether someone is execution focused. It's very difficult to know in an interview. Okay. But yes, the process you can understand. Are you clear thinking? Are you breaking things up, etc.? Right. And the other thing is actually integrity. Very difficult to know in an interview whether the person has integrity. But sure, when you're a young person, they're looking at whether you're thinking clearly. And therefore, process is where is what people are looking at. Because other things can be taught. I have to keep remembering that we are talking about interviews of people who are 20, 22, 23. That's what we're talking about, right? So yes, the process is what people would be looking at. And clarity is what Mr. Narayanan said. What is clarity? That you are seeing the goal, but at the same time, you know the company and you know which direction the company is going or what that particular department is looking to do. That's homework. You will get that.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Rohit. Okay, we Anvita, who has been.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So Anvita Ghosh, you can please unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to Gopal sir and Karunakaran sir and ma'am, Anubha ma'am. I actually wanted to ask that when we are talking in an interview, sometimes we know the answer to a particular question. We know what we're talking about, but sometimes we make a particular gaffe. So we, out of nervousness, we just say something foolish and we or start talking start talking like a bullet train or start stuttering in between. So like, and that sometimes that leaves a mark on the impression the interviewer has of who they're talking to. So like, what do we do in a situation like that?
One is that if, like Harsh said, and someone did answer that also, Adya, I think, if you think that's a problem with you, that you tend to think very quickly and answer very quickly, one is to say, can I take a minute? If it's a deep question and it needs you to think, waiting for a few seconds to answer is perfectly okay. Don't answer like a bullet train. Okay? So that's a bit of practice and a bit of training, but it will help you. Some people do talk quickly, some people do respond quickly. And general thing with Indians and general thing with a group of friends near the coffee or the stalls that we have between A block, B block, C block is that everyone's talking at the same time. You can't take that into an interview. For example, you must wait for the person to finish the question. And it's perfectly okay to wait a few seconds before you answer. There is no hurry to reply. It goes down well if you do that. Okay, Anvita? Does that answer you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Anvita, I'll add to it, Col.Gopal. Thankfully for everybody who's a fresher, the person who's interviewing you, 99.9% of the people who are interviewing you understand that. So many times, something which students use, and I'm just telling you a tip which other of your seniors have used. If you're very nervous, one, of course, before you enter the room, take a couple of deep breaths. But suppose you've gone inside and you're still nervous, and 90% chances are that you will be nervous in your first 2-3 interviews. Just tell the interviewer, face your fear at that time. Sir, this is the first time I'm giving an interview. I'm so terribly nervous. It's absolutely all right to say that. Don't do that when you're in your second and third job interview, right? Till you're a fresher with zero experience and you've never worked in your life, go ahead and say to the interviewer, sir, I'm very nervous. I've never worked. And they know that. And most of your interviews will happen at campus or remotely through your campus team, right? It's okay to accept that you're nervous. Even if you bumble a little bit, the interviewer will, first 2 questions, they will allow you time to settle. They will ask you general things, how are you and tell us a little bit about how did you spend your day. They'll allow you time to make the mistakes in the first 2-3 interviews. First 2-3 questions. So don't let that thought irritate you too much in your mind. You will get nervous. Your first 2 questions, you will fumble. Okay, you will talk a lot. Like when I'm speaking, I will, otherwise my English and my grammar is not so bad as I am right now to you. In front of you, my own students, I'm fumbling, I'm using, words, I'm breaking in between. I'm doing this to you. So imagine what will happen when you face an interview. It happens. It's okay. First 2-3 questions, forget it. Then you will warm up to the fact that, okay, I know this. I know this answer. The interviewer will understand that about you. So my only ask from you is the fear of an interview stops students from preparing for the interview. Or so you're so good, but the fear stops you in showing to that person how good you are. It's okay. It's okay. Make the mistakes. Make the mistakes. It's absolutely all right. He knows you're a fresher. Okay?
And if I can...
And I think Anvita also asked whether if you know that what you said was a mistake, you are perfectly okay to say, I think I'd like to answer this again. Again, it will be taken extremely well. Maybe it didn't come out. Maybe it didn't come out very well. Can I just answer that again? It's perfectly okay. And also stay composed. All of us are different. All of us are nervous at different moments, at different times. But for me, what's worked is my life doesn't depend on that one thing, right? So I will walk in thinking that the worst case is, what is the worst case? The worst case is that I'm not selected. But then you say, okay, that's not the worst case. It's okay. So if you go with that sort of a mindset, you're fine. That's what gives me confidence, saying that it's okay, right?
And if I can add some number to this, what has helped me, Anvita, is we have a tendency when a question is asked to jump to an answer immediately. Another tip I can give you is try and maybe paraphrase the question to get clarity. Paraphrase the same question. So what you're asking me is, tell me a moment of my childhood. It gives your mind the time to process that information while you're actually paraphrasing and getting clarity if you and the interviewer are on the same question or the same page. Another tip which I had given to Harsh also when we spoke last time was we have a tendency to think in paragraphs in our head. It starts all here. So stop thinking in a long paragraph format the answer and start thinking in bullets. Start thinking in for example, any answer, I have a tendency to think in points where I say, all right, number 1, number 2, number 3. So when you bullet something down, even while we're writing an email, if you bullet down an email, it'll be shorter because the sentences will be shorter rather than writing a whole paragraph. And the tendency is when we start talking, we don't end. So, and a common thing which I think Anubha and I have now when you mention Anubha is when I'm nervous, I tend to speak very fast. So I have to make a very, very conscious effort that I slow down and, process the words, the sentences in my head, know what words are coming out, whether even making sense or not. So the tendency is, again, one is, think in bullets in your head, not in paragraphs. So Harsh does the same. I gave advice to Harsh as well, not in paragraphs, bullets, and, have those key bullets in line. I hope that helps.
And please attend Dominique's session. A quality which Dominique has and which many people don't have is whenever I'm talking 100 things at one go, Dominique has a habit of removing all the faff and taking out that one thing. He will help you go through this journey. So please attend his interview skills.
We're starting the whole lead program next week. So yes, looking forward to all of you being there. Right. So
Dominic, can I give one more tip about how not to be nervous?
Absolutely, sir. It'll help all of us.
Play competitive sport. Play competitive sport. I'm serious. What happens when you play competitive sport? And one of the things I'm guessing I'm talking to a lot of students, is that you're going to see your hostels renamed. It's not going to be called 1A and 1B and 1C and stuff like that. It's going to have names, by the way. The reason is that you must play sport from one hostel to another and become competitive. When you say my hostel is going to win, and you can't play 1A versus 1B. You got to play name versus name. So you're going to do that. Okay. Now, the reason is while SNU has teams, but there are few people who would have played before, but everyone must play, and not just play, but also play competitively, even a little way. Because what happens is there's something called adrenaline. You all know that? An adrenaline rush happens to you. The same adrenaline rush happens to you when you're playing a sport and the score is 18 all at 21. You're going to win a game in badminton. Like today morning, we were thrilled because we were losing. I get to play with a badminton coach as a partner. And we have two assistant professors who are really, really good, who are our perpetual enemies on the other side of the court. But it's war every day in the morning. Okay. And I get to choose not because I'm the president. I get to choose because I'm the oldest man on the court. So I get to choose who to play with. So obviously I play with the badminton coach. Okay. Ujjwal sir. And the score was 18-20, 18-15 twice. And both times we won. Now what happens is your adrenaline is rushing when you are playing competitive sport. Same thing happens when you walk in through the door in the interview. When this happens to you many times in playing competitive sport, you're used to it. Your body is used to it. You're not nervous. Okay. Do things which are risky. Okay. Walk into, don't do it outside the SNU campus, then Jay sir and others will have problems. But basically doing risky things is where you're triggering those adrenaline and other things in your body. So when you walk in through the door, sports people are rarely nervous, by the way, because they've gone through this in their life so many times. So play competitive sport. No, Dominic, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, unmute. So if there are any more questions, or we could be winding up the session, if there's any last thoughts, there is a request that if you could share your list of books that we could maybe sent out to us so that we could.
Yeah, I always have a perpetual list of books. So sure, I'll have to make it based on something that you ask me. Now, I'm not going to send it to you. Somebody has to write to me, then you'll get it. Okay. But this is a very good question, Anmol. How should we answer when we are asked about how to talk about our weaknesses? Personally, I find it much harder to find and tell what my exact weakness is. Now, first and foremost, since this is a favorite interview question, right? One of the things you can definitely prepare for is to prepare for your weaknesses. Now, you're always very conscious about saying, oh, interview, how can I say my weaknesses? For example, one of my weaknesses is that I'm a great starter. I'm not a great finisher. Now, at any age in your professional life, it doesn't look like the best question to answer if that is the answer in an interview. Because maybe they don't want this guy who's not a great finisher, right? But that's a real weakness. But it's not a bad idea. You should definitely share real weaknesses because all of us have it. It just shows that you're reflective, you're humble, and you're okay to share it, right? But you can't say things like, after 7 o'clock, I get drunk every day. Now that's not going to be taken very well. So that better not be a weakness. But otherwise, reflect on your weaknesses, share it. It shows a great deal of reflection, humility, and an ability to see a side of you which you want to improve. Nothing wrong in sharing weaknesses.
So on this point, as interviewers, as we as students around the country and the world are getting smart on how to handle interviews, the interviewer is also getting very smart on how to evaluate you. To a fresh student, the interview will not ask you, what is your weakness, right? They will look at you, they will look at your resume and they'll say, okay, my friend, you've done 4 years of economics majors, right? It requires, how come you've not spent even one summer doing an internship? you've only done majors in economics or you've done majors in mechanical engineering, okay? How come you've not, does your university have a credit-based internship? And give us an example, okay? That could be one way. Or they could say your 12th score shows that you've got 95% in your 12th. Your GPA of your first semester showed that you dropped to 6.2 and then to 6.3. So what is the reason that? And they'll ask it very nicely. They'll ask you very nicely. You'll say, sir, when I joined the university, what happened? I was struggling in the first few months. Then I joined this club. Then I joined that club. And then I joined sports. And I did not manage to focus on my classes. The first class starts at 9 o'clock. I used to go late. And don't think that this has not happened. For 55% to 60% of the students answer a weakness like this, right? So, and you can't change anything about it. If you've reached your 7th semester, which is the time you will face interviews, and your GPA shows a certain GPA, and the fact that you've got no internships, or you've not taken part in any activity, whether it's a competition, whether it's a project, whatever measures you as a student. Like we as employees get key areas of evaluation, whatever our area is, KRAs. Similarly, students also have KRAs, right? So an organization will never ask you, what is your weakness? They will look at what do we have, what are the specs we have, and this shows you what you've built up in your first 3 years. So don't think that I'll answer this in a certain way and I'll get out of it. The interviewer is also learning how to take interviews in a certain way. So they'll ask you examples of where you've led a crisis situation. Let's say you say that you are a team leader in Breeze. Okay, they will ask you a specific example. Give us, let's say you're responsible for sponsorship. How much sponsorship did you personally? Which are the organizations? They will get into the depths of answers. Okay. And at the same time, they will compare what is your GPA, how have you done in your interview, technical question. So keeping everything in mind, they will evaluate you as a candidate. It won't be that they will ask you a question just like that, and you will answer straight and they'll buy you for it. They also have measures in front of them. So build up your profile from now, right? From today.
Right. I think on that, excellent point that you made up, Anuban. I think that is something which all of you should join in tomorrow for sure. Tomorrow we have somebody called Minakshi Singh. She is an agency business manager with Google. And she's actually going to talk about what Anuba just mentioned. The last word was introduction to your personal branding. How do you brand yourself as an individual? So that's what she'll be talking about tomorrow. So I think that's a session you must attend. That starts at 9:30 in the morning. If there are any more questions that we have, I don't see any more questions coming up at the moment, but it has been wonderful to us.
We have a student raising his hand. You have to raise your hand on your laptop, not like this. Okay, please mute Ramakrishna and let him ask.
Ramakrishna, okay. Go ahead.
IT, please unmute Ramakrishna.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
And Ramakrishna, before you face your interview, you have to learn how to raise your hand on the digital platform.
My hand was up. It's still up.
Okay, all right.
One of my favorite quotes from a Batman movie was that you should not be afraid of fear. And it often hits home when it comes to pressure situations. So, sir, I wanted to ask you, there are lots of intangibles that we have in life. You know, someone passes away or there's some problem at home. Something or the other is always happening. And we're often told to keep church and state separate. We're told to keep our work and personal life separate. But when you go into an interview, do you propose, as someone who's taken more than 3,000 interviews, do you propose an interviewee blocking out all secondary thoughts, blocking out everything else that is happening around them? Or do you feel that that might help fuel them to do better in a way?
Ramakrishna Bhattabyal, very deep question. It takes like about half an hour to try to answer that. but let me try and get the gist of what you're saying. Firstly, if religion or spirituality makes you a better person, right? You do not need to block it out. It is who you are, right? And therefore, that doesn't mean that you need to keep that separate, but it means that don't bring church into conversation where it's not expected to be there. If someone asks you of church, by the way, for the rest of you means religion. That's what Ramakrishna is talking about. It doesn't mean church, but it means talk about religion. So you could be deeply religious, but if it's not contextual to the interview, don't bring God into everything, right? It may not work for you. Because, for example, in a school like ours, we don't want deeply overtly religious people who wear it on their sleeve, because you're going to have children from all faiths, and therefore that's very important. But if you're going to a particular faith school, for example, it may make sense to say that, I stand by my religion and it gives me a lot of succor, because you're going to take it back into your classroom and with your children. So what you need to do is to use it where it's appropriate, including in the conversation. But it's a very deep question, because I think for you young, especially for those who don't deeply are religious, because I think the value of religion is in spirituality. It's in understanding that there is a belief that there is a power above yourself. It keeps you humble. It keeps you in belief of destiny. It keeps you saying that I'm not responsible for everything. There's a higher power. It makes it easier. You're less nervous, for example. So therefore, there's a lot of goodness in having belief. So that's a good thing. But for those who you don't have it, then maybe you should read widely, understand astronomy, understand history, because history and astronomy and time and space tells you that your ego doesn't matter. Your feeling hurt is a very personal thing. There's a problem with you. And those things are very good to know and good to believe in, because our life, as they said, is this small flash of light between two huge areas of darkness on either side. That's what our 50, 60 years of little flashes, right? So don't think we are so important. So as long as you're humble and do your little bit in your whatever comes your way, you're okay. All of our problems is because we overthink of our own importance. So I'm sorry, I've given you a sermon now.
Fine, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think, Dominic, we are nearly 2 hours into the session. Ramakrishnan, I will not add to this answer of Col.Gopal, because it doesn't have any add to it, except from an employer's perspective, because my job is to tell you from an employer's perspective. Religion in an interview or at the workplace is a no-no. Why? We will discuss offline. Second, your question was on emotional situations or problems you may have gone through. Ever so often, I have come across interview candidates who use problems real or made too big in the interview to gain sympathy of the interviewer. Okay? No. Absolutely a no. So if if you've had a loss in your family, something tragic has happened, it's all right to tell that person when you've joined him on day one that this is what you were going through, not use it during the interview. It will only cause him to think of how the hell did I manage to have this candidate in front of me, right? Not the right way to secure yourself a job at all. With that, I know there are still questions, and students, we are going to have round 2 and 3 of this discussion. And I promise you it will have Col.Gopal, ideally in person. With that, we are 2 hours in, so I'll request Dominique to please put in the closing remarks and close this session today.
And it's been an absolute pleasure being with all of you. Look forward to seeing you back on the campus very soon.
Absolutely, sir. Pleasure has been ours. It's been wonderful interacting with you. I mean, this is probably the second time, or rather third time I'm interacting with you. First time virtually, but 2 were in real when I met you a year and a half back, and inspirational then, it's inspirational today. It's been wonderful. Thank you for taking out time for all of us. And I think it's this week has been really a lot of learning for all of us. I mean, be it faculty, I've seen parents who are part of this. It's been an immense learning. Credit goes to each and every one of you student as well for taking out time, for your own self. This is your own, growing up, learning from different people, and we are there to support you, to help you anytime you need it. So all the best. Tomorrow is the last session with Meenakshi Singh, who is with Google, and she would be talking about your personal branding, how you can make it even better. So all the best. Have a wonderful evening ahead, and thank you, Gopal sir and Anuva. Have a good evening.
And if you're missing your SNU lake, here you go. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Signing off. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.